Are you looking for an adventurous summer job? Well, how about hunting invasive Burmese pythons in the Everglades? The South Florida Water Management District is paying $8.10 an hour to hunt the slithering creatures.
For decades, the Burmese python ruled Florida's Everglades like an unstoppable monster. It wiped out mammals, devoured alligators, and spread across the swamps with almost nothing capable of stopping it. Scientists believed it had reached the top of the food chain, until something impossible began to happen. One by one, the radio transmitters hidden inside tagged pythons started going silent. The snakes weren't escaping. They weren't dying from disease. Instead, the tracking signals kept moving, from deep inside the stomach of an unknown predator. No bodies, no struggle, just vanished pythons and a mystery that left even veteran researchers stunned. But before we reveal the shocking footage, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we bring you the world's most incredible wildlife mysteries, hidden discoveries, and unbelievable true stories every week. Then the trail cameras finally captured the truth. What they recorded shocked wildlife experts and revealed a predator powerful enough to hunt the hunter itself. The footage is disturbing, the discovery is real, and what lurks in the Florida swamps may be far more terrifying than anyone ever imagined. Let's uncover the mystery. In 2021, Ian Bartoszek and his colleagues at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida were conducting what appeared to be a straightforward wildlife study. They had surgically implanted radio transmitters into young Burmese pythons and tracked their movements across the Everglades every day, hoping to understand how these invasive snakes traveled, hunted, and survived in the wild. Then something completely unexpected began to happen. The radio signals themselves never failed. Every transmitter continued broadcasting exactly as it should. Instead, it was the snakes carrying those transmitters that started disappearing without a trace. The first mystery involved a snake known as Python 19. For nearly 3 weeks, the tracking data looked perfectly normal. Then, suddenly, all movement stopped. It wasn't the typical stillness of a resting or cold snake. It was something entirely different. The research team followed the transmitter through thick cypress swamps and chest-high sawgrass until they reached its final location. What they found was baffling. There was no dead snake, no blood, no signs of a struggle, no shed skin, and no disturbed ground. The only evidence was the faint, steady beep of the transmitter, now coming from inside another animal. Some unknown predator had swallowed the python whole, transmitter included, and was still moving through the swamp. Then, later that same October, the mystery deepened. 2 more tagged pythons suddenly vanished. Once again, the transmitters continued sending signals, but the snakes themselves had completely disappeared. When scientists examined the recovered evidence, the results were astonishing. X-rays revealed the unmistakable spine of a Burmese python curled inside the stomach of an unidentified predator. One of the snakes weighed over 50 pounds and measured nearly 13 feet long. Its neck had been crushed before the body was hidden beneath thick brush. Something had successfully killed one of the Everglades' most dangerous predators and then swallowed it whole. After spending more than 2 decades studying wildlife in South Florida, Bartoszek described the discovery as one of the most unbelievable moments of his career. 3 separate pythons, each carrying a working transmitter, had all ended up inside the same unseen hunter. Despite researchers constantly working in the area and dozens of trail cameras monitoring the swamp, nobody had ever seen the animal responsible. The team checked every piece of equipment, verified every signal, and tested every possible explanation. Everything functioned perfectly, leaving them with only one conclusion. Whatever was hunting these pythons wasn't a tracking error or equipment failure. It was a real predator, powerful enough to consume a 13-foot python whole and stealthy enough to avoid detection by experienced field researchers. To understand why this discovery shocked everyone, you first have to understand just how much damage Burmese pythons had already caused throughout the Everglades. These giant snakes are not native to Florida. Their natural home is thousands of miles away in Southeast Asia, including countries such as Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. In those ecosystems, predators, parasites, and diseases evolved alongside them over millions of years, naturally limiting their numbers. None of those natural controls existed in Florida. During the 1980s and 1990s, thousands of young Burmese pythons entered Florida through the exotic pet trade. They were inexpensive, eye-catching, and popular as pets. But as they grew into massive snakes reaching 15, 18, and even 20 feet long, many owners simply released them into nearby canals and wetlands. The problem became even worse after Hurricane Andrew struck South Florida in 1992. The storm destroyed reptile breeding facilities and released hundreds more pythons directly into the wild, allowing their population to explode. With no natural predators waiting for them, the snakes quickly established themselves. Native wildlife had never evolved to defend against an invader like this, giving the pythons an enormous advantage from the very beginning. The impact on the Everglades was devastating, and the numbers alone don't fully capture what actually happened. Raccoons were among the hardest hit. In some parts of the Everglades, their population dropped by an incredible 99.3%. That's far beyond a simple decline. It was almost complete disappearance. Opossum numbers fell by 98.9%. Bobcats declined by 87.5%. Marsh rabbits and cottontail rabbits disappeared entirely from areas they had occupied for thousands of years. The destruction spread throughout the food chain. Adult white-tailed deer became prey. Even alligators, ancient reptiles that survived the extinction of the dinosaurs, were found inside the stomachs of giant Burmese pythons. Birds suffered as well. Researchers identified remains from 58 different bird species inside captured pythons. 58 species affected within only a few decades. If you're enjoying this story and want more incredible wildlife mysteries like this one, take a second to subscribe. It's completely free, and your support helps us continue uncovering fascinating stories that most people never hear about. Because what happened next was something no scientist expected, and almost nobody believed at first. Dr. Frank Mazzotti, a wildlife ecologist at the University of Florida who has spent more than 20 years studying the Everglades, estimated that the invasive python population had grown into the tens, or even hundreds, of thousands. Authorities tried nearly everything to stop the invasion: federal import restrictions, state bounty programs, trained detection dogs, thermal imaging drones, environmental DNA testing, large-scale removal competitions, and even assistance from the Army Corps of Engineers were all brought into the fight. Yet, despite those efforts, the invasion continued to grow. Eventually, many of the scientists who knew the Everglades best quietly reached the same conclusion. The Burmese pythons had gained the upper hand. After weeks of exhausting fieldwork near Naples, Mazzotti summarized the situation in simple but alarming terms. The Everglades ecosystem was being consumed, and there appeared to be no natural predator capable of stopping the pythons. The evidence left little room for disagreement. Then Bartoszek's tracking monitors began showing more disappearing pythons, and the mystery changed completely. Scientists were no longer asking whether the Everglades could survive the invasion. Now they were asking a far stranger question. What could possibly be hunting the predator that seemed to hunt everything else? Their first assumption was a massive alligator, but the evidence didn't fit. Alligators kill by crushing their prey and performing violent death rolls, leaving behind broken bones, torn flesh, and scattered remains. None of those signs were present. The search for the mystery predator quickly ruled out every obvious suspect. A Florida panther kills by crushing the skull or breaking the spine, leaving behind puncture wounds, claw marks, and unmistakable signs of a violent struggle. None of those clues existed. There were no tracks, no blood, and no evidence that a panther had ever been involved. A black bear didn't make sense either. Bears are incredibly powerful, but they aren't capable of swallowing a 13-foot snake whole. One by one, every known predator was considered, and every explanation collapsed under the evidence. Nothing in the Everglades behaved the way this unknown hunter had. With no answers left, the researchers turned to the only option remaining. They installed trail cameras at every location where a transmitter had mysteriously gone silent and waited for the next disappearance. Days turned into weeks without a breakthrough. Then, one morning, a researcher opened a newly recorded video, and the entire room fell silent. The footage showed no giant alligator, no panther, and certainly no mysterious monster hiding in the swamp. At first glance, it barely showed anything at all. Lying motionless among the dead leaves near the water's edge was a thick, dark-colored snake so perfectly camouflaged that it blended completely into the forest floor. Moments later, a young Burmese python casually moved into view, completely unaware that danger was only inches away. In a split second, the leaf litter exploded. The strike happened faster than the eye could follow. One frame showed nothing. The next showed powerful jaws already clamped onto the python's tail. There was no chase and no chance of escape. The attacker calmly worked its jaws farther along the python's body, stretching its mouth to an almost impossible size while swallowing the struggling snake inch by inch. It was a scene that seemed to defy biology. A snake, nearly the same length as its attacker, slowly disappeared into a throat that appeared far too small to contain it. Only after the last section vanished did the predator quietly disappear into the darkness, carrying an enormous bulge inside its body. The predator responsible wasn't some unknown creature. It was a Florida cottonmouth, a venomous pit viper that had lived in these wetlands for thousands of years. Ironically, every researcher on the project had likely walked past countless cottonmouths during previous fieldwork without ever imagining they could be responsible. The answer had been hiding in plain sight all along. X-rays removed any remaining doubt. The documented cottonmouth measured only about 34 to 42 inches long, yet inside its stomach was a Burmese python nearly equal to its own length. Bartoszek spent a long time studying that image. He didn't celebrate it as a victory because the discovery revealed something far more unsettling. While millions of dollars had been invested and countless agencies searched for ways to stop the python invasion, a native snake that almost nobody paid attention to had quietly been accomplishing what experts insisted couldn't be done. And if cottonmouths had been doing this unnoticed, it raised an even more disturbing question. How many other native predators had been fighting back without scientists realizing it? Looking back, perhaps the discovery shouldn't have been so surprising. The Florida cottonmouth, scientifically known as Agkistrodon conanti, has always been one of North America's most efficient predators. Most adults measure between 30 and 48 inches long, though exceptional individuals can exceed 6 feet. Thick-bodied, muscular, and perfectly adapted to flooded forests and blackwater swamps, these snakes evolved here long before Burmese pythons ever arrived. The Everglades had always been cottonmouth territory. The invaders were the newcomers. Most people recognize the species for its famous defensive display, opening its mouth to reveal the bright white lining that gave it the name cottonmouth. But its real advantage lies elsewhere. Hidden between the eyes and nostrils are specialized heat-sensing pit organs capable of detecting even the slightest difference in body temperature. Darkness offers no protection. Camouflage offers no protection. Even a young python produces just enough body heat to stand out against the surrounding water, making it nearly impossible to remain hidden inside the cottonmouth's own habitat. Add to that its powerful hemotoxic venom, which destroys blood vessels and surrounding tissue after a single bite, and a juvenile python has little chance of survival once it's been struck. The most fascinating part of the discovery was that this wasn't unusual behavior for cottonmouths at all. Bartoszek's team confirmed that they naturally prey upon at least 27 different snake species. They were already specialized snake hunters long before Burmese pythons arrived in Florida. The invasive python wasn't creating new hunting behavior. It had simply become another item on an existing menu. The hunting method was brutally effective. Strike quickly, release the prey, and allow the venom to do the rest. A young python measuring only around 18 inches hasn't yet developed the strength needed to overpower large predators. Once the venom enters its system, the outcome is almost inevitable. Within just a few months, researchers documented 3 confirmed cottonmouth kills inside the same study area. That wasn't random chance. It suggested that native predators were beginning to recognize juvenile pythons as easy prey and were taking advantage of the opportunity. But the surprises didn't end there. As researchers continued reviewing transmitter data, they realized another hidden story had been unfolding the entire time. 5 of the 19 monitored pythons had actually been killed by American alligators, including one snake nearly 9 feet long. The alligators had never surrendered their home. They had been resisting the invasion all along. Then, in June 2021, another trail camera captured something that had never before been recorded in the scientific literature. A bobcat approached an active Burmese python nest and immediately attacked the female guarding it. Rather than scavenging abandoned eggs, the bobcat repeatedly struck the giant snake with its front paws, forcing her away before calmly eating the eggs one after another. It became the first photographic evidence of a native mammal deliberately raiding a Burmese python nest. Soon afterward, researchers documented even more native predators joining the fight. Owls and hawks were filmed carrying away young pythons before they could grow into massive adults. Black bears preyed upon them. Florida panthers killed them. Across the Everglades, Picayune Strand, and Big Cypress, an entire network of native predators had quietly begun pushing back. Cottonmouths hunted from the forest floor, birds of prey attacked from above, bobcats destroyed nests, alligators controlled the waterways, and bears searched the dense brush. No one organized this resistance. Each species was simply doing what millions of years of evolution had prepared it to do: fight back against an invasive predator that didn't belong. Even so, one difficult truth remained. Despite these encouraging discoveries, it wasn't enough to stop the invasion. A single female Burmese python can lay anywhere from 12 to 36 eggs in one clutch, and sometimes even more. She wraps tightly around the nest, generating heat through muscle contractions to keep the eggs warm until they hatch. The young mature quickly, survive for decades, and continue producing new generations, making the battle for the Everglades far from over. The numbers paint a harsh reality, and they don't favor the Everglades. Since organized removal efforts began, human hunters have captured more than 5,000 Burmese pythons from the wild. During the 2024 Florida Python Challenge alone, nearly 200 snakes were removed in just one weekend. At first glance, those figures seem impressive, but as Bartoszek and other researchers have pointed out, they barely make a dent in the overall population. These snakes are experts at disappearing into one of the most inaccessible landscapes in North America. Vast areas of the Everglades are nearly impossible for people to search on foot, which means countless pythons remain hidden. That's why every natural predator matters. Every cottonmouth lurking beneath fallen leaves, every bobcat raiding a nest, and every alligator patrolling the waterways represents another chance for the ecosystem to push back. Each successful hunt buys the Everglades something incredibly valuable: time. Time for these survival behaviors to spread through native predator populations. Time for new generations to learn. Time for an ancient ecosystem to slowly rediscover how to defend itself against an invader that never belonged there. Perhaps that's the most remarkable part of this entire story. None of it was organized. No agency instructed cottonmouths to hunt juvenile pythons. No conservation plan taught bobcats to raid python nests. While scientists drafted proposals, secured funding, and developed new strategies, nature had already begun writing its own solution. The trail cameras have proven that this resistance is real. What they still can't answer is the question that matters most. Is it happening quickly enough? Can a handful of cottonmouths become hundreds, then thousands? Can alligators, bobcats, birds of prey, bears and panthers together slow an invasion powered by one of the fastest reproducing predators in the Everglades? That uncertainty is exactly what keeps Bartoszek and his team returning to the swamp. Their research continues, the cameras remain active, and the Conservancy keeps expanding its monitoring network, hoping each new signal brings evidence that the balance is finally beginning to shift. Tonight, somewhere deep within the dark waters of Picayune Strand, a cottonmouth may be digesting another young Burmese python, its swallowed transmitter still quietly sending signals through the swamp. At the very same time, less than a mile away, another python nest could be preparing to hatch dozens of new snakes. That is the reality of this battle. One side is learning to fight back, while the other continues to multiply. So, what do you think? Is the Everglades finally adapting quickly enough to reclaim its home, or are we simply witnessing a slower version of the same outcome? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to follow every new discovery as researchers uncover what happens next, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. This story isn't over yet. In many ways, it's only just beginning.